A red carpet welcome to America for a man accused of war crimes. US President Donald Trump applauded his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, as the two leaders greeted each other like old friends. But behind the handshakes and photo ops, substance was lacking. There was no ceasefire, no sanctions relief, and no concrete agreement. Despite expectations, especially from President Trump, there was no breakthrough. The summit in Anchorage had been billed as a global moment. Putin opened his brief press conference with nostalgic nods to US-Russian cooperation in World War II. For Moscow, it was a chance to highlight past victories. For Trump, it was an opportunity to brand himself as the peacemaker who could end the war in Ukraine. But the outcome told a different story. I think Trump didn't lose, but Putin clearly won. Putin got a flyover, a red carpet, generous airtime on Russian state television, and no new penalties for his war. Trump left with vague promises of future meetings and hints of freezing the front lines in Ukraine in exchange for territorial concessions. Analysts close to the talks noted this gave Putin room to continue the war, shielded from new consequences. US media, meanwhile, focused on Trump's fatigued appearance and his murky message. Instead of drawing red lines, he praised the relationship as fantastic. Critics argue that this allowed Putin to leave as the undisputed winner. Europe closes ranks. There was concern in Europe that Anchorage might mark a turning point in US policy. Determined to prevent that, European leaders launched what some described as a full-court press. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Washington not alone, but backed by NATO Secretary-General, the President of the European Commission, and leaders of the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Finland. Their message was unmistakable. No peace deal that forces Ukraine to surrender land, and strong security guarantees modeled on NATO's Article 5. The European Commission President underscored that borders cannot be changed by force and that Ukraine must be able to defend itself. By arriving as a united front, European leaders turned Zelensky from an isolated visitor into the centerpiece of a transatlantic coalition. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney added his support, praising signs that the US might be more open to providing long-term security guarantees. In a measured statement, Carney said, "Robust and credible security guarantees are essential to any just and lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine." While careful not to confront Trump directly, Carney echoed Canada's broader stance. Peace cannot rest on unstable compromises. Tariffs and trade shockwaves. Just days after the summit, attention swung back to Trump's escalating global tariff war. On August 7, sweeping new duties hit over 60 countries. The shock was immediate. The US slapped a 39% tariff on Switzerland, one of the highest yet. The EU was threatened with a 35% tariff unless it committed to $600 billion in US investments. This came despite a prior agreement capping EU tariffs at 15%. The message was blunt. Even signed deals could be followed by new demands. Trump's trade strategy was less a stable framework and more a pressure tactic: escalate, demand concessions, then escalate again. Switzerland became a cautionary tale. The Swiss president flew to Washington without a formal White House invitation, proposing increased US LNG imports and adjustments to a Lockheed Martin fighter jet deal. But Switzerland refused to open its protected agricultural sector. Talks collapsed. The 39% tariff remained. For a country that exports high-value goods, watches, chocolate, pharmaceuticals, the economic cost is real. Under Trump's approach, only concrete, visible concessions earn relief. Canada's strategic patience. Facing a potential 35% tariff, Canada is watching carefully. Prime Minister Carney has opted for strategic patience, diversifying trade toward the EU and UK, maintaining open channels with Washington, and resisting rushed concessions. Canada holds real leverage: critical minerals, energy, integrated automotive supply chains, assets the US cannot easily replace. Ontario Premier Doug Ford emphasized that these tariffs hurt American consumers and jobs, underscoring Canada's position of strength, not submission. The Swiss and EU cases outline two paths: make major concessions for relief, or stand firm and risk penalties. Canada is trying a third path: measured diplomacy, firm resolve, and economic diversification. The gold tariff shock. Then came a jolt to global markets. In early August, the Trump administration confirmed that 1 kilogram gold bars, the global standard for bullion, would face the full 39% tariff. Switzerland, the world's gold refining hub, was hit hard. Gold shipments between Europe and the US halted overnight, and US gold prices surged. This was more than a trade hiccup. It was a signal. If gold could be targeted, so could other high-value exports, energy, minerals, precision manufacturing. Canada understood the message. The gold tariff became a warning shot. Even sectors long thought safe under USMCA can be pulled into Trump's tariff strategy with a single customs memo. The episode reinforces Canada's push to diversify export markets and prepare contingency plans. Greenland, the new frontier. Trump's second term has also revived an old obsession, Greenland. Once floated as a joke, the idea has become a full-blown strategy to secure rare earth elements and break China's dominance in critical mineral supply chains. Greenland's reserves of rare earths and molybdenum are now seen as vital for national security. In June 2025, Greenland granted a 30-year permit to an EU-backed mining project. China still controls 95 to 97% of midstream rare earth refining, and Beijing's export cuts earlier this year forced Ford to shut down US factories within weeks. For Trump, securing Greenland isn't optional, it's essential. He's combining public pressure with behind-the-scenes negotiations. But Greenland's leaders insist, "We are not for sale." This mirrors Canada's experience. In 2025, US tariffs on Canadian non-USMCA goods rose from 25% to 35%. Canada coordinated a firm response. Carney worked with provincial leaders like Doug Ford to hold the line, while expanding trade ties with Mexico and the EU. Canada, the EU, and Greenland are now cooperating to reduce exposure to both US and Chinese market volatility. For Ottawa, this means protecting sovereignty, safeguarding key sectors, and preparing for future trade shocks. Conclusion: a new global landscape. The Alaska summit underscored a recurring theme: the gap between spectacle and substance. Putin left with powerful images and no consequences. Trump left without a deal. Europe rallied, Canada resisted pressure, and the Arctic emerged as the next geopolitical battleground. From tariffs to territorial ambitions, Trump's second term is reshaping global norms. The challenge for allies is not just to respond, but to adapt faster, think longer term, and protect their core interests in a world of shifting rules and sudden moves. The next chapters, on trade, security, and resources, are already being written. And how Canada, Europe, and others navigate them will shape the global order for decades to come.